Hey, welcome back to Pluralsight. I'm your instructor, Christopher Reese, and in this module, we're going to cover wireless attacks. Now, as we know, wireless networks are everywhere. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, of course, very rare, but nowadays, everywhere's got a wireless network. Whether it's a school, government building, corporate environment, of course, small businesses, even throughout just the general public areas, there are Wi-Fi networks now everywhere. So understanding the different ways that these wireless networks can be compromised and the devices being used and the technologies and kind of the techniques is critical as a security professional, because these are the things you're going to run across and run into on a very consistent basis. So it's a good idea to really familiarize yourself with each of these concepts and understand what role you can play in making sure these things don't affect your networks. So we're going to cover such things as rogue access points. We're going to cover jamming and interference. We'll cover evil twins. We'll cover two things dealing with just going out and finding wireless networks to attack, and that's war driving and war chalking. Then we'll talk about Bluetooth hacking technologies or methods, basically bluejacking and blue snarfing. We'll talk about IV attacks or initialization vector attacks. We'll also talk about packet sniffing, near field communication or NFC. We'll talk about replay attacks, and then of course WEP or WPA attacks. Okay, two types of wireless access or wireless protection protocols. So let's go ahead and get started. And to start off with, rogue access points. All right, so on a wireless network, there are access points that allow, as the name implies, allows people to get access to the network. Well, in certain situations, hackers can put what's referred to as an unauthorized access point, and that's used to steal or intercept data. Okay, we'll cover that more in just a moment. And it can be combined with jamming and interference techniques. So in other words, if someone were to put a rogue access point on a network and they want to make sure that you use that access point instead of the legitimate access point, they can do so by jamming or interfering with the legitimate access point. All right, so it's installed in a corporate network by unauthorized personnel, all right, as you might imagine. And it can be installed by hackers in public areas as well for something referred to as a man-in-the-middle attack. So if we look at this a little more closely, all right, so here we have a typical wireless network, all right, we're a traditional network, I should say, with wireless access points. So you see the WAP device in the illustration here, the wireless access point. Well, we have a legitimate or wireless access point. We can use laptops, mobile devices, and so forth to connect to that wireless access point. And depending upon how we have our network set up, we may also have a radius server, allowing people to authenticate to that server. It's going to give us a higher level of security than if we just simply had them log into the wireless access point itself. But be that as it may, for this illustration, let's just say we have a wireless access point. Well, if someone were to come in and put a second wireless access point or a rogue wireless access point on the network, they could then in turn jam or interfere with the legitimate one. So that way, everybody that's going to connect now connects to that rogue access point. And in doing so, the hacker now has access to that access point, obviously. They're going to be able to capture the credentials. They'll be able to capture the traffic going through that wireless access point and do various levels of malicious activity. So you can kind of pair this with something referred to as an evil twin. And an evil twin is a rogue access point that is impersonating a legitimate access point, and it uses the same SSID. All right, so basically here we have a wireless access point with an SSID of pSite access point 1 or AP1. The rogue access point or the evil twin will come on board and actually use the same SSID, potentially jam or interfere with the legitimate one. Okay, so basically the same situation we just talked about previously. Now just using an example of one mirroring the SSID of the legitimate access point. And in doing so, they could then throw up this captive portal, which we talked about in a separate video, but it is a login page. So when a customer, whether they're sitting in a business or a school or perhaps a coffee shop, what have you, they go in, they sit down as normal, they connect to the access point that they think is legitimate, but now there's a captive portal there that the hacker has put up to mirror or to impersonate the legitimate captive portal. And when they do that, when you put in your username and password, they typically will then just throw back some type of error page so that you think, oh, well, I can't get on for whatever reason, or they may bypass and just allow you access anyway, right? But what they're actually doing is using that captive portal to capture your username and password. Even though you're really not authenticating to the real authentication mechanism behind the scenes, you don't know that because you're passing right through the rogue access point and getting access to the internet, or they're simply capturing your credentials and then responding back with an error page, in which case you think something's wrong with the network.